Shalom, dear friends. This is Rabbi Yehuda Glick from Jerusalem, from the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation. And we are about to begin with a special prayer for the nations. We will wait a few more minutes so that we can begin the prayer session. It's right now 1:59. We will be starting at 2 p.m. exactly. We have one more minute before we start. We're going to be starting at exactly 2 p.m. 2 p.m. we'll be starting a special Passover prayer session. Here, I hope we can all be seen at exactly 2 o'clock. It's right now 1:59. In less than a minute, we will begin the beginning of a special Passover, Pessach, prayer for the nation session. If those of you have any specific prayer requests, you can put them up now, because we will be mentioning people from all over the nations, from all over the world, who have put in special prayer requests. So you're welcome to tell us where you're from, and if there's any specific prayer you want us to pray, and now is the time to mention it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the time right now is 2 p.m. in Jerusalem, and we are beginning our prayer session. As you all know, we began the Passover celebration just yesterday, and when God saw the suffering of the people of Israel, they were crying out to Him. They were yelling to Him. They were praying because of their suffering they were going through, and God heard their yelling. As it says in Exodus chapter 6, we know that God heard our prayer, God heard our prayers, and He decided to go down and save Israel. He called upon Moses, and He said to Moses, "Go down and go to my people, because I've heard their suffering. I know what they're suffering." Moses was just a shepherd. And God called him and He said, "Listen to me. I want you to know, I saw," it says in Exodus 3, and the Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their slave drivers. For I know their pains." God heard the pain of the people of Israel. He goes down. He descended to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from the land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites. So God rescued His people. God went down to hear the prayers, and He redeemed the people of Israel from Egypt. When we left Egypt, God says to the people of Israel a very special thing. And I'm reading now in Exodus 23. In Exodus 23 it says, "And you shall not oppress a foreigner or a stranger. For you know the feelings of a stranger, since you were strangers in the land of Egypt." You were foreigners, you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And therefore, the main message that we are supposed to learn and study from Exodus from Egypt is that we have to care about those who are suffering. And therefore, we have received so many prayer requests from all over the world. And today, as we celebrate our redemption from Egypt, as we celebrate the fact that we are free people, now is the time to call out to God and to ask Him to listen to our prayers. As you all know, in Exodus 22, God says, "I hear the prayers." He says, "I listen when they're yelling to me." He talks about a foreigner. Exodus 22, verse 20. "And you should not mistreat a stranger, because if you oppress a foreigner, and you shall not oppress any widow or orphan. If you oppress them, he cries out to me, I will surely hear his cry." God says, "I will hear the cry of somebody suffering. I will hear the cry. And you, my chosen people, have to listen to cries of people who are suffering, who are people who are going through any kind of affliction, whether it's an illness, whether it's any kind of suffering. And today we have calls from all over the world for people who are going through sufferings. I want to begin my prayers today for the nations with a request we received from a dear friend of ours, a dear friend from Kenya. And I'm talking about Kiyan Yui Mugoro, and from Peshi. They're both from the Kogyok Youth Organization of Kenya. And they have requested prayer for two issues. I don't know if you're aware, by the way, I don't know how much you're aware, but in the last few months, East Africa has been suffering a the most severe locust attack in the past 70 years. And Kenya is suffering very much, and so is Ethiopia and Somalia. And they're suffering, extremely suffering, and there's a danger for Uganda and for Yemen and for Oman and even for Iran and Pakistan. There's a terrible, one of the worst desert locusts attacking all of Eastern Africa these days. And therefore, at this time, I want to call upon you. I want to call upon you all to pray. I want to call upon you all to please join me in prayer for the locust in the eastern of Africa. It's going to cause hunger. It's going to cause hunger and suffering for so many people. There's not going to be any food. There's not going to be, it's going to, for millions and millions of people in Eastern Africa. I also want to pray for the people of Kenya who are suffering of other issues, including persecution by those who are not letting people to serve God as they want. The same thing, we have a specific request from Samuel Burea, also from Kenya, who is stuck in Kenya. He wants to get back to Congo, and all of these issues, including the coronavirus, is blocking these people. But I want to mention another one. Mr. Rami Kamel is a prominent Coptic Christian activist for freedom, for religious freedom in Egypt. He founded the Maspero Youth Union, and he's been arrested several months ago because he is fighting for human rights. He's fighting for freedom of worship. We cannot allow a world which is with persecution against those who are serving God. How can we allow a situation where people in the world who want to worship God, who want to serve God, are being arrested? And so the request to pray for Mr. Rami Kamel from Egypt, who is a prominent Coptic Christian activist. All he's been sitting in jail now for the fact that he's fighting for freedom of worship. Shalom for our dear friend Beverly from Texas. You pray also, we have Janice Elvira, a missionary in Brazil, who has had a heart attack in an ICU. She feeds hundreds of people there, and they need her. So we have a request here now for a prayer from Brazil. We're praying here for those who are in need. This is what God taught us. When he redeemed us from Egypt, he told us, you are to be caring for the nations. So today we already prayed for the people who are suffering from locusts in Kenya. We pray in all of Eastern Africa, in Ethiopia and Somalia and Uganda and South Sudan and Ethiopia and Yemen and Oman and even Iran and Pakistan. We care even for the people of Iran. They're going to be suffering from the locusts. It's one of the worst we've had. We prayed for Samuel Brunei, who's stuck in Congo and Kenya, wanting to return to Congo. We prayed for Mr. Rami Kamel, who's a prominent Coptic Christian activist in Egypt, who's fighting for freedom of religion. We have a request also from the Ukraine. There's the UCSJ. The UCSJ is an organization that fights for against the desecration of Jewish cemeteries in Ukraine, that they're destroying them, especially in the city of Lviv. We want to add another prayer request coming in from Vietnam. In Vietnam, the United Buddhist Church of Vietnam is suffering terrible persecution. And we're calling to end the harassment and the arrests and the persecution. We are fighting for freedom of religion for the Buddhist Church in Vietnam. We have a request also coming in today from Algeria. the Muslim leadership in Algeria. There's been new elections lately, and they're fighting against churches. They're closing down churches in Algeria. We also have a prayer request from the Kuti Jewish community in Uganda. They're a new, small community, and they're fighting for their freedom of religion. We here in Israel, in Jerusalem, people who are believers in God all over the world, who celebrate Passover, have to care about those in the world who are suffering, wherever they are, whoever they are. And therefore, we have to call out to God and pray to God. Please help these people that are suffering. Listen to their calls. You said, God, you said to us that you listened to the calls of the people of Israel in Egypt, in Exodus 3. And you said to us that we have to be careful and caring for those who are suffering all over the world, foreigners, strangers. That's what you taught us when we came out of Egypt. That's what you taught us. And we are here to call out and pray for all those who are suffering. We are here to call out and pray for all those who are suffering. God, please listen to their calls out. Listen to their calling of you. Listen to their prayers. And God, we here from Jerusalem are thanking you for allowing us to be free people, to redeeming us from Egypt. And now we also call upon the entire world who is suffering from the coronavirus. Please, God, let us overcome this tragic suffering. And let us please continue and worship you and be united for you with you. We want to be united, not in suffering. We want to be united in worshiping you. We want to be free servants of God. And therefore, I call upon all of you. Please pray. Pray for the people of the United States. We saw in the United States almost 20,000 people already died from the coronavirus. We see people from all over the world, Iran, Spain, Germany, United Kingdom, suffering and dying from the suffering that we spoke about. So I want to recall again, prayed today for the locust in Kenya and all of Eastern Africa. We prayed for Samuel Burney, who's stuck in Kenya. We prayed for Mr. Rami Kamel, the prominent Coptic Christian lead activist. We prayed for the preservation of the Jewish cemeteries in Ukraine. We prayed for the Unified Buddhist Church in Vietnam, for freedom of religion and for end of harassment and arrests and persecution. We prayed for the churches that are being closed down in Algeria. We prayed for the Puti Jewish community in Uganda. And we prayed for our dear friend from Brazil who's suffering right now, and she's in the intensive care unit. Please join me in prayer and calling out to you, to God, to listen to our prayers. We want to be united in service of you and not united in suffering. We want you to hear our prayers. You promised, God, you will hear the prayers of those who are suffering. We know that you are the only true Lord, one and only God. And you hear suffering, just like you heard the people of Israel suffering in Egypt. You hear the sufferings of everybody. You hear the sufferings of everybody suffering all over the world. You hear them. And you will not ignore any of these prayers. You will not ignore any of these calling out. We're calling out to you, God. We're united. People from all over the world are following us. Right now, at this moment, we have people following us from Texas, from Brazil, from all over the world, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe. We have people following us from Central America. Please, God, all those people who are suffering want to see the miracles that you're doing, the terrible sufferings of all people in the coronavirus, the terrible sufferings of the people suffering from all the different things that are suffering in the world. We care. We're not going to ignore the sufferings. Whether they're sufferings of persecution against religious worship, whether they're sufferings of natural effects, as we said, the coronavirus and the locust, whether it's people who have been persecuted for their faith, being persecuted for their faith. They want to worship you and they're being persecuted. How can we allow that? And of course, at the same time, we want you to allow us to have free prayer and free worship of you on the Temple Mount, the place you chose for your throne. And all the people here that are watching us today from all over the world, please join in to my prayer, to our calling out to God, the one and only God. We want to unite in the service of you. We want to be, and as you promised Solomon in chapter 9 in the book of Kings, Shalom, the Africans in China who are being evicted and persecuted right now, as well as the underground Christians. By the way, there are many people from China who are being, we spoke before about Janice Alver, missionary in Brazil, who has a heart attack. But I want to say that many people from Kenya who are right now in China are being persecuted. All the people who are strangers who are living in China are being persecuted because of the coronavirus, and they're attacking people just because they're strangers, just just because they're foreigners, just because they're not locals. And Christians who want to worship God, all people who want to worship God, we are here calling against any kind of persecution, against anybody who is suffering from any place in the world, especially people who are suffering just because they want to worship God. This is something that we cannot tolerate. People who have to be able to worship you as you promised in the time of the end of days, the time of freedom to worship you, and you will unite us in listening to the suffering and helping and picking up and raising and lifting all those who are suffering. Please, God, listen to our prayers. Shalom. Please, God, the God of shalom, the God of harmony, the God of diversity, the God of unity, the one and only God of the world. Please help and listen to the yellings and the prayers of all those who are praying to you deeply from in their hearts. As you said in Psalm 146, it says that you are close to all those who call you, to all those who call you truly, genuinely. Please, God, listen to the prayers of all those who are calling you genuinely, really want to be close to you. You are close to them, and you will listen to their prayers. God Almighty, today is the second day of Passover, and from here we are calling upon you, God Almighty. We want to see your light and your love to all of the creation, to all of the creation, and all the creation. As you said it in the days of the creation, that you looked at everything and everything was so good, and when you created mankind, you said it is very good. So mankind and the nature that you've created has to serve you and not cause suffering to the world. We want you to hear our prayers, and I'm calling upon all of those who are watching us today. Send in your prayer requests on to the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation website, shalomjerusalem.org. Send in your prayer requests. We will have you in our minds this whole week. We'll be praying for the nations. We will be praying for all people all over the world. If you have any prayer requests, you're welcome to send them to shalomjerusalem.org. Africans in China are being evicted and persecuted. When we have here from Middlesboro, Kentucky, sending prayers and praying for Janice, and praying for Israel from Texas. Thank you all those who are joined us today. We are really following the prayers and binding them together that they will all go directly to the one and only God from his chosen city, Jerusalem. Thank you so much, Josie Schneiles, for thank you for praying us this morning, and thank you praying for the people of Indiana. We're praying for people who lost their jobs. Yes, we're praying for all people who are lost their jobs all over the world. It's a terrible thing to lose jobs. It's so terrible when a person loses is the source of the food of his family, and it loses. It harms the dignity of a person who loses a job. So please, God, now is the time to hear all the prayers, to collect them, and to listen to them, and to respond to them positively. God, we love you. Shalom from Jerusalem to all of you. Please don't forget to visit our Facebook page, Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, to visit our YouTube channel, Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, to visit our website, shalomjerusalem.org. We love you all. Shalom from Jerusalem. Happy Passover.